All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the BrainDead podcast. I'm Joseph,
And I'm John.
and today we are coming at you with our thoughts on solo leveling. We're going to start off by discussing season one, and then we'll move on to season two when it finishes airing. But with that said, anything you want to add on before we hop right into it, John?
So just to clarify, this is a brief synopsis on season one, our thoughts and collective impressions of it. Uh, we we would we'll just talk about it briefly and see where it goes from there.
All right. With that said, let's just start off by summarizing the entirety of the solo leveling season one story as a whole. So, to start off, we follow the story of Sung Jin Woo, the quote unquote weakest hunter of the Hunter Association, which the hunters are just people who enter dungeons or portals that pop up around the area to try and prevent them from breaking and causing catastrophe. Now, this hunter is a special hunter as we follow his story so far. He dies in the beginning. Shocker, right?
Shocker.
But as we progress through the story, after his death, he is thrown into a world of a leveling system. This leveling system allows him to increase specific stats and gain different power ups based on different things. Think of it like an old RPG esque style. This man has faced several hardships throughout this entirety of this story, just become strong and powerful enough to survive a dungeon on his own, leading to the point where he had to make decisions a normal person should not have to make, to the point of survival of the fittest had to take its true form. This man has fought monsters, people, and even his own mentality at times, just to survive in this horrendous environment he was thrown into. But enough said about that brief synopsis. Why don't we hop into our thoughts about the first set of episodes? Why don't we start with the episode that got everyone hooked onto this series with that giant grin, episode 1 through 2. It,
Right.
right, yeah, in my opinion, episode 1 and 2, though a bit slow, did hit perfectly in what the manga was going for. It had that brief air of mystery, having him enter a quote unquote double dungeon, only for, them to be stuck in there, having to make a decision, a choice, which leads to his utmost demise at that time. But I'd say it hit the nail on the head, honestly, with what it was going for, showing that grin of that statue that everyone was anticipating. One of the most anticipated scenes in the series, honestly, that could have either made or break the series at that time. What about you, John? What do you think?
So with the first two episodes, serves as a great introduction as to what the overarching world of solo leveling would be. He introduces the concepts of hunters, mana, and also introduced the concept of levels of hunters. You got your typical levels from like E all the way to S being the most strongest. And as for our protagonist, Sun Jin Woo, he so happened to be an E rank, but not just any E rank, the weakest E rank of them all. So weak, in fact, that he constantly needs to be healed after minor attacks that would basically murk any normal human being. And he constantly has to be healed by their party's healer, in fact. And when it came to that double dungeon scene, yeah, again, it was a survival of the fittest situation. They all had to do whatever they needed to do to survive, and they ultimately left Sun Jin Woo to his death while everyone else escaped. And that's when I felt like it was a perfect opportune time to introduce the leveling system with giving our friend a second chance at life and a chance to improve on himself and gain more strength.
I wholeheartedly agree. It was a good opportunity to actually introduce that system. I did like how in the episodes coming after that, when he's still lying in bed in the hospital, the system's starting to give him his quote unquote brief tutorial on how to use it, giving him like daily, you know, quests like, oh, do push ups, sit ups, run a kilometer, run a mile, stuff like that. but also showing us what could happen if you fail to do these. Because the system had its own punishment system, throwing him into that desert with all those quote unquote sandworms that chased and tried to kill him throughout the entirety of that interaction. I'd say the way the system was set up at that time was set to push a new beginner as if playing an old RPG to actually start grinding and increasing your levels, figuring out how do I want to build my character. And as he leveled up, his physical appearance did not only change in terms of his muscle mass and everything, and his body actually changing, but his face and everything also took slight changes as well. But that's a bit further down the line in this synopsis. I think we should go into him entering his first dungeon through the system. What do you think, John? What was your opinion on those episodes before we move forward?
Yeah, thanks for that. So with him learning how to navigate the system, with the daily quests and basically the punishment quest when he doesn't really complete that quest, it does give that sense of urgency to level up and get stronger as fast as he can. And also, with that being said, as you mentioned, it was in the style of an old RPG game, and since Sun Jin Woo had his crux of being the weakest one, um, he initially put all of his most of his points into strength. When then he realized, as the quest uh, went down the line, he needed to put more of his points into other abilities such as agility, stamina, intelligence, even loading up his own health so he can fight for longer.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and that actually is a great segue to us discussing about his first actual dungeon raid with the system itself, which he can only enter these dungeons himself at the moment. And the first dungeon he enters, he has to fight, what were they? Dire wolves, I believe they were called.
Yes, he fought direwolves and goblins, previously his crux, but at that point in time, he was able to handle them easily. Then came the direwolves. He initially struggled against them for a little bit, but then he was all good. But then in that same dungeon, he had to face off against the main monster, which was an armored snake. Of course, he had to run for his money with that particular monster, but in the end, with his he managed to persevere by not just using his blades to deal the monster in, but use his strength to choke the thing to death, and ultimately what clear out the dungeon and get his prize.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Once he got to that snake boss at the end of the dungeon, this is where he finally realized I'm no longer weak, I am actually strong. Realizing I can't do nothing with the weapons I currently have in my possession. So instead of trying to stab it and try and break through this armor with a measly knife, he decided, I'm just going to brute force this. And I don't believe he strangled it to death. I believe he just crushed its actual whatever organs were in that area. But after that, we're going to move on to, I think, is a turning point of the entire series and his own character. The point where he had to make a decision to kill or be killed by something that is no longer just a monster in terms of the system seeing them as monsters. Which is where we enter the first dungeon raid he does with a bunch of random people, and he gets to meet his first ever friend that we can quote unquote say is going to be a good partner for him going forward. In this dungeon, though, we know that he's just going to help mine mana crystals, make a little extra money on the side, and all that. You can see his appearance has started to gradually change as he's leveled up. But in this dungeon, he's actually betrayed by the leader of the team that he is working with. And from there, he has to decide, do I want to kill these people so I live, or will I just let myself die because I want to keep my humanity? All in all, he made the decision, I need to live. I died once, no more. He was tired of being weak and did what he had to do. And in my opinion, introduced the best song that I ever heard from anime in a while. That just kept me hooked. That has now moved its way into my playlist and non repeats. But what do you think, John?
Yeah, thanks for introducing that concept. Yeah, it is true. In that same dungeon, this group he joined up with that didn't have any healers or nothing. They were just, uh, in lack of better words, just warriors. Um, there he grasped this moral concept of I don't want to kill anyone, but if I don't do anything, then I'm gonna die, and my friend who I just met, he's also gonna die. So I have to do what I must to survive. And once he does, he finishes them all off. He's just left feeling like a part of him died so he can live. But not only that, the main dude who led that party, he was the older sibling of an S rank hunter in Korea who was stationed in the US. So, of course, that puts our friend Sun Jin into a very interesting predicament where not only has he killed someone, he'll also have to face a potential repercussions from another hunter.
I could have said it better myself, but I believe the younger brother or the older brother of that hunter, I believe that younger brother, that S rank, didn't he move to America and abandon the Korean guild itself and became a part of American guilds instead?
Actually, yeah, he once he got that strength, he just went to the U.S. to pursue better opportunities as it was introduced. But as soon as he heard of his older brother's death, then he wanted to pursue any action to get his revenge on Sunjin.
Yep. And I can't remember if that was at the end of that episode or at the end of another episode where it's hinted that okay, he's going to come to try and come after Jinwoo. But that's later down the line. We could discuss all that next time we discuss season 2 and all that. Because I believe after this, this is where we get to meet once again the people who abandoned Sun Jin Woo in the Double Dungeon, as well as an interesting turning point of the series, which shows a more interesting difference between the manhwa and the anime itself. Because as Sun Jin Woo is taking another job to go raid a dungeon, he meets up with some of his old teammates from the last dungeon. That some of them that who left him, and some of them that he told them to leave. Now, they reminisce. They get introduce each other once again. Obviously, some of them are still having what's what I'm looking for regrets of leaving Sun Jin Woo to die there, because some of them decided I'm just gonna run out of here. I'm not gonna even stay to even try to help. But what the turning point was is this raid was being basically filled in the rest of the members with criminals who were trying to get their sentences basically knocked down. Now there is an A rank hunter amongst them that's supposed to be there to keep these criminals in check. This A rank actually decides to take payments on the side from people just to kill these criminals. And he does. He quote unquote kills all the criminals and then starts killing his team members because he didn't want any witnesses and he just liked to kill. Now, two of the members, the healer and a powerful fire mage at the time, were basically going to fight this guy by themselves and told Jinwoo, because they still believe he's the weakest hunter, to stay back. To the point to where Jinwoo says, "Nah, fam, I got this," and just starts 1v1ing this assassin to a point of defeating him and having them leave the dungeon while he ended everything. Now, the difference between the anime and the manhwa, because I recently reread that specific chapter, was one of the prisoners actually survived, and Jinwoo left him to fight the goblins while he stood on the sidelines. Basically, still gained a redemption for the family that had to suffer from this criminal's acts and all that. But what do you think, John, about that episode? What was your opinion?
Yeah. Yeah. With that concept of say this retainer, he was a B rank in charge of everyone else, uh, his former teammates, the prisoners, and in that episode it was revealed that a father paid him to kill the prisoners because they did something to his daughter. Which there he says, "No, like you got it all wrong. Like I ain't doing this for the money. I do this because I love killing people." So that being said, after Sunjin fights him and ultimately takes his life, he again states that another part of him died to live, and he wonders if he's going to struggle with that going forward, or if he does it enough times, he's not going to feel anything afterwards. So it brings an interesting perspective of how he's grasping with that concept of not only getting stronger, but also just thinking he has to take a life to get stronger.
Couldn't agree with you more than myself. But as we are getting to the final arc, those final episodes, I do want to add on the way they have developed Sun Jin Woo's character throughout the series has been great so far. The fact they're having him still battle with these concepts of life, death, taking another person's life, and all that for survival, is just showing how much of a character he's growing and how everything around him is still changing. But as we get to the final episode, which is an episode that potentially could have outraged a bunch of fans of the series, the episodes where he fights Igris, the shadow, the shadow that he claimed as his own for his own army. This episode had several turning points. A point where he had to make a decision to let his own objectives fail so he could be sent to that desert area so he could level up and heal himself and recover for his stamina to keep going with Igris. Igris himself, with a sword, and he even says this later down the line in the series, if he had used his sword, I would be dead. Which this leads to the point of he's understanding, okay, I need to get stronger and stronger and stronger to be able to keep going. Now, after defeating Igris and defeating an entire army of undead knights that were just being summoned by a bunch of wizards, he gains his ability. The what was it called? I believe it was Shadow Monarch, right?
Yes. So, jumping into that, once he defeated Igris and the rest of the soldiers or knights in that certain dungeon, um, he basically leveled up so many times to the point where instead of having his old moniker, the Wolf Slayer, Wolf Hunter, he obtained a new class, Necromancer. But then it leveled up to the point where his new job title will be the Shadow Monarch. Now, what that Shadow Monarch ability does, he gained the ability to extract the souls of his defeated opponents. And the caveat is, he'll have to do. He can only do it 3 times if they're of a certain strength, which means he'll have to, like you said, level up himself so he can extract the souls of stronger opponents. And with that being said, it leaves off with a titular phrase he coined to get his souls. That that being, arise.
Yep. And if he had messed, I feel if he had not, if the voice actors have messed this up in any way, shape, or form, this could have really negatively impacted the series as a whole because him saying that word is one of the most impactful parts of the manhwa. And I will say this: I do believe he still has the moniker of "quote unquote" Wolf Hunter. I believe that was just an ability he had that allowed him to deal more damage to beast type enemies and such. But that it doesn't really come up again because at that point, everything is now going to focus around his ability as a necromancer, as a shadow monarch, summoning more and more powerful shadows, creating an army of shadows to be able to fight at his side and such. But even without those shadows, he is still the most OP character there is. To the point where there are characters that speculate he's not an E rank. There's some who say, okay, he has to be at least an A or an S rank. And some who already know, like, okay, this man has to be an S rank. Something's not right here. He's even been tested, I think, what was it? He got retested twice in season one just to see if he was.
Yeah. So he did get retested. Um, yeah, I'd say once after he woke up, and again a little bit afterwards from that, just to check if he was still the same. And initially, yeah, he still had the same stats as an E rank hunter. But with that being said, maybe in season two they'll check him again to see where he's at.
We just have to wait and see. Like I said, we're not going to cover that until we've gotten to the point of the series is over. We'll probably release that at least a week or two after. This way, people still have time to be able to watch the series, watch that season, see everything that happened. Because we understand people with their scheduling might not be able to watch it for a week or so after it airs. Or, ironically, with how soul leveling has been in recent times, it has crashed several streaming sites, not once but twice, with 2 episodes this year alone. So it's hard to say how long it'll take people to be able to watch those episodes with everything that happens. But all in all, season one was very very slow to start. It took its time starting, which is understandable. It wanted to build the world around it. But as it progressed and got closer and closer to the end of season one, you can see it picks up. It has the fights that people want to see. The animation is there. And then once you get to season two, it's still there and everything's just going a bit more fast paced, from what I've seen at least.
No, yeah. Yeah, as you said, did see, I did hear of the Crunchyroll site crashing from the recent season, which I I thought that was just insane that it happened the way that it did, which indicates that there's a lot of traffic of people wanting to see this season. So as you said, yeah, we'll probably uh discuss on it a little bit more after this ending of the season, the current season, so we can give our perspective thoughts on it.
Yep. But all in all, like I said, for those who have not seen the series, we highly recommend it. It's a good watch. They're only like 13 episode seasons at most. You could probably finish it all within a day if you want to binge watch it or just watch it over time. Another thing that we do want to also mention, there was technically a recap movie, which if it's available and you watch it, you might be able to see the first 2 episodes of the season two. Uh, Not really much you're missing at this point. You could just go ahead and watch season two without watching the recap movie. It's not really necessary. But with that said, I think we're gonna hop on out of this. What says you, John? Anything else to add?
No, other than the fact that if you want to know more about like what happened in season one, and you want to also catch the first episode of season two, you can watch the recap movie that came out in December, I believe. Yeah, and it came out in December. So in that movie, it just recaps season one, first 30 minutes or so, and then the first 2 episodes of season two, so you can get a feel of how what that current season, which it is a lot of action, a lot more things happening since season one served as a kind of groundwork for establishing what's going to happen.
Yep. But with that said, I think it's time we close on out of this podcast for today. So once again, I'm Joseph,
And I'm John.
and we'll catch you all on the flip side. Bye bye, everyone.